Hello, everyone. Good evening. We are here on a Monday night, which is a very special opportunity for me. Thank you all for joining me for episode 15 of season 5 of Black Writers Read. My name is Nicole Young Martin, and I'm the founder, producer, and host for this series. Of course, I gotta say it. Happy Black History Month, or as with every episode of Black Writers Read, happy 365, 52, 24/7. For those who know me well and have been following the platform for some time, you already know that I wear the Black queer woman badges with honor and pride every single day. Intersectionality is a gift and a blessing. I am proud to be Black. Y'all know that. I'm like 92% of the African continent. And I'm from Detroit, so you can't get any Blacker than that. I'm beyond excited to welcome today's guest to our virtual platform on the eve of the release of her second poetry collection. This is bound to be a very fulfilling evening, so let's go ahead and get started. Black Writers Read showcases, celebrates, and honors the word, work, and traditions of Black writers from across the country, across genres, across experiences, and across the African diaspora. Black Writers Read is a behind-the-scenes conversation into the craft and what it means to create as a Black author in today's society. Since starting the series during the summer of 2020, we've hosted over 70 authors representing 10 plus genres from 5 countries and 23 states. Our platform includes the live stream interviews, audio podcasts, book clubs, and curriculum development assistance. Find us online at blackwritersread.com. Today, we welcome Roya Marsh. Bronx, New York native, Roya Marsh is a poet, performer, educator, and activist. She is the author of Daylight, a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award in Lesbian Poetry, and the forthcoming Savings Time, which is scheduled for release tomorrow. Roya works feverishly toward queer liberation and dismantling white supremacy. She is the co-founder of the Bronx Poet Laureate, a PEN America Emerging Voices mentor, Lambda Literary Faculty, and the awardee of the Lotos Foundation Prize for Poetry and the 2024 Bronx Recognizes Its Own grant from Bronx Council on the Arts. Roya's work has been featured widely, including the Academy of American Poets, Poetry Magazine, The Village Voice, Nylon Magazine, Huffington Post, The Root, Button Poetry, BAM, Carnegie Hall, the Kennedy Center, the Apollo Theater, Lexus Versus, and Flow, On One with Angela Rye, BET, and The Breakfast Poets Volume 2, Black Girl Magic, published by Haymarket in 2018. Today's conversation will center around her poetry collection, Savings Time, which is scheduled for release tomorrow, Tuesday, February 4th. The poems in Roya Marsh's second collection, Savings Time, wear their raw feeling and revolutionary forcefulness on their sleeves. Alternating between confrontation and celebration, Marsh trains her unsparing eye on the twin subjects of Black rage and Black healing with practiced musical intention. In poems fitting between breathless prose and measured lyricism, Marsh contemplates the contradictions and challenges of Black life in America, tackling everything from police brutality and urban gentrification to queer identity, presidential elections, and pop culture, all while calling for a world where self-care, especially for Black women, is not just encouraged, but mandated. And this is a quote from the book. No one told the Black girl, she writes. See you later was a prayer begging us survive our own erasure. I know this all too well. As unforgivable on the page as when recited in Marsh's legendary spoken word performances, the poems in Savings Time are focused on both revolution and self-love, at once holding society accountable for its exploitation of Black life and honoring the joy of persisting nonetheless. Please, if you have not, Google Roya, look her up on YouTube. Her slam poetry is fucking amazing. So it is such an honor to have her on this evening. For those of you who are new to Black Writers Read, here's the format. Roya will read an excerpt from her work, then we'll chat. If time remains at the end of the conversation, we'll open it up to question and answer. with those of you who are joining us today. We typically have folks joining us from Facebook and YouTube. If you have a question, please feel free to include it in the comment section on the platform where you're joining us from today. I will compile the questions and either pose them to our guests following our conversation or insert them during an appropriate time within our chat. I'd now like to welcome Roya Marsh to the virtual stage. Hello.
Hello, hello. Thank you, Nicole, so much for that remarkable introduction, as well as for opening this space. I'm so excited, and I'll be reading some pieces from my forthcoming collection, Savings Time, out tomorrow.
Yeah, so the stage is yours. I'll be on shortly.
Sometimes what doesn't kill me makes me wish I were dead. Surviving is a slow decay, corrupted healing of the mind that refuses to forget how I was almost a memory. A few more inches to the left, and that would have been all she wrote. A day late, and the cured be useless. One false move, and I am never again. The night after the pills, a gulp of swallows on a power line. Sing me into Wednesday. The sun heckles me through a hospital window, and I'm supposed to rejoice while death takes a ticket, impatiently waits for the red light above a window to call me home. Another place I'd rather not. Today, my pronouns are black and alive. So, if you are into hip hop, if you are moderately aware that the Grammys came on last night, you would know that Kendrick Lamar won Record of the Year for a diss track, um, of all things. And Kendrick's work is definitely um, some work that has led to introspection in my own experiences and my own writing. And this next piece has an excerpt from his song, All Right, at the beginning of it. We been hurt, been down before. When our pride was low, looking at the world like, where do we go? And we hate po-po. They want to kill us dead in the streets for sure. I'm at the preacher's door. My knees get weak and my gun might blow, but we gon' be all right. My name is Roya Marsh, and I am a black poet who will not remain silent while this nation continues to murder black people. I have a right to be angry. I have a right to be joyful. And black joy is real, is native. It's not white. It was here before that. Before God said, let there be light, so y'all could witness a glimpse of what you've been missing. And black is not a color. It absorbs all the colors of the visible spectrum and reflects none. Joy is a feeling of great pleasure or happiness. Black joy looks like me, like him, or her, or them. It knows no gender, just knows prosperity in spite of white supremacy. Black joy is a stone worthy of digging, of excavating, a coveted jewel to be held up to light, to sparkle, to dazzle. Black joy knows this poem is necessary no matter what your judgment says, because you can't tell me black joy won't break any scale. You put it on, shoot. You can't tell me black joy ain't the scale itself. Black joy is contagious. So contagious, folks get caught appropriating, caught pinning black against black, or joy against joy, or Remy against Nikki, or Cardi against Nikki, or Lotto against Nikki, or Glorilla against Nikki, or Doechii against Nikki, because healthy, wealthy black femmes just get too close to God and they only want to see us black and joyous if they make us that way. But they cannot create black joy the same way they created race. They cannot dictate our blackness. They cannot dictate our happiness. And yeah, it's true. Once you go black joy, you'll never go back. Ask the Kardashians or Rachel Dolezal. Those black holes make a staple of black. Remember, black and happy can be synonymous. So whenever you hear the word black, instead hear happy. Case in point. In 2016, we bid farewell to this nation's first happy president. February will now and forever be known as Happy History Month. Hollywood still won't cast happy people to play our happy selves, and yet another happy body is found slain. That's all the more reason to preserve this shield. No hot commodity to be bought or bootlegged or Kylie lip kit backshot brainwash. Be your happiest when your mouth is open. Be your blackest when your mouth is open. Shout it at Black Writers Read. You shout black, shout joy, and remember, white supremacy is a beast that feeds on attention. We gotta be happier and hungrier and starve it, leaving it nothing but the bones. And I had the great pleasure of slamming with that particular poem, and it was popularized, and a lot of folks wanted to talk about it, a lot of folks wanted to request it. And in doing that and in traveling and in sharing that in more and more spaces, I've of course encountered folks who had critiques and or thoughts around either the poem in and of itself and or my experience and how I got to that place. Because of course, if you hear somebody share a piece that's 2 minutes and 37 seconds, that must mean you have the full picture of their life. And so, because that actually was just sarcasm and is very inaccurate, as a writer who is an artist that is ever evolving, I moved on to then have this conversation with folks who would ask me why I'm not angry, or who would praise me for not being angry based on me talking about my black joy, to further explain to them actually that blackness itself isn't a monolith. Neither is black joy, neither is black rage, right? And our expressions of it. And so, with that, there is the birth of this final piece that I'll share with you all tonight. And so timely, let me say. It is the night after another election, and I don't smile. I lie, awake, wondering what kind of ancestor I will be. I am the child of a hard father who only wanted soft daughters. I learned to make a perfect fist on my own. I learned to swing by watching, by feeling. Yeah, I bark like the dogs do, loud, and in the face of danger, I gnash my teeth and secure all things vital. I learned to fight before I learned to speak. And so my hands grew into grenades. I learned I hold the pen tight, learned to explode only when necessary, learned though I am always at war, not every room is a battlefield. So I shout black joy across the world. And folks with smiles, the smell of green bean casserole would praise me for not being angry. The definition of angry is showing extreme displeasure, annoyance, or hostility. Well, shit, I've been angry. My fists have painted holes into walls. I was 14 the first time I had to stomp a man's face into mashed potatoes. I used to pray to a father who would not call home a black butch with a slick tongue and a hunger for freedom. I am the kind of sorry no one teaches us to forgive. So I say black joy, but they hear shuck and jive, think me palatable, the good black, Well, nah, this ain't what enlightenment looks like. I got a backpack full of screw ups and screw yous, but there came a point where tears could no longer wash this stuff clean, and there are still days that I want out, but I am no better if I only save myself. And right now, there are people lining the floors of arenas waiting for me to tell them that losing is at capacity. Guess we going to win. Someone gave me a pen and I wrote a spine into this sack of skin. Imagine me not being angry, explaining to white people that anti-racist work ain't hashtagging or posting a black box not fit enough to hold our last breaths, or raising us up by their white guilt straps. Anti-racism means you are willing to die for my kind of black that built a country they keep trying to write us out of. What good is writing poems to my unborn when I have nieces and nephews and students? They are shutting down one prison to build four and have a bunk with our last names on it. They are waiting for us to forget that we are chosen. And yes, while I'm God's daughter, my godson's father is locked in a cage. So no, I don't write poems or metaphors about caskets and burials. See, that's just another way for the world to hold me hostage. Tell the dead I am still here. Tell the here I am still fighting. I have lived and learned to walk on the seas beneath and between us. Yes, this ship is sinking, but I'm teaching niggas to swim, to wade in the war zones where our joy endangers us, eating ice cream, playing video games, buying groceries, in a couch, in bed, in a parking lot, in a backyard, in a classroom, in a church, on a wine train. The people in my family are still breathing. And that is not a crime. The people and my family are still reproducing, and that is not a crime. So I say we gon' make it. Be real black for me. Someday we'll all be free. All right. And it sounds like I'm talking to God on repeat. I was born black and butch in America. Bitterness beckons, inspired by my mere existence, born, waiting for this land of the free to bust a capitalist in my ass. But you think me being angry is the problem? I say black joy, and I mean I forgive my father. I mean abolish the police. I mean dismantle white supremacy. I mean I was handcuffed one night and kettled on the Manhattan Bridge the next, and still live to teach your kids in the morning. I am everything America threatens to break, and the threat and the break and America itself. What I'm saying is no. I am not angry. I'm coming. I say black joy, and I mean, who are you when I start taking what I am owed? Thank you.
Whoo!
Uh,
I'm almost about to cry. I hope that it is okay to say, I want to thank you for continuing in the traditions of James Baldwin, Gwendolyn Brooks,
yes.
um, Maya Angelou, Audre Lorde, Toni Morrison. Fuck, I'm forgetting writers
Yes.
right now. Like, it felt like you just called on all the ancestors and it's like, yo, you gonna carry us. And then also to thank you also for quoting Pulitzer Prize winning writer Kendrick Lamar. He is one of my favorites for
Come
so
on.
many reasons. Like, woo, yes.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh my God. Which, because I want to monitor time.
Yes.
I might, so for folks who are new, I tend to send the questions early to my guest to help curate the experience. I'm going to change the order a bit. I want to start off, especially given your writing is so crafty. And one of the things that I hear in academic spaces in the ivory tower, and I heard this about my own work in poetry, because I do performance poetry, is slam spoken word cannot exist on the page. I'm like, fuck that. Like, you just demonstrated tonight the importance of why it needs to exist on the page, and your craft and your transitions and like your storytelling are just phenomenal. And I love that you are an educator and an activist. So, the first question that I want to ask you, Roya, is when did you discover that your vessel needed to be writing?
Yes, thank you. I want to start before we get into the nitty gritty just by saying I enjoyed all of these questions, and they felt very, even if they're questions that have just been reworded for particular artists, they felt so incredibly intentional. So I was very grateful to have to spend time formulating these ideas. And to your question, I say honestly, I feel like I was born crying on beat. You know, I'm the
Mm.
youngest of eight. Um, yeah, and I have like four older brothers specifically who are really rearing me in the vein of hip hop. Always, even if involuntary, by having somebody's huge, loud, expensive boombox speakers blaring music through the wall next door, as we had a shared wall for our bedrooms. And I was myself 4 years old recording diss tracks to my older brother on this little Fisher Price tape recorder because as a younger sibling, you experience your fair share of, I don't want to call it bullying, but it is absolutely bullying. But as the youngest sibling, it's just like, oh my, why did they even have me? But because I was watching my older siblings and how they would respond to their older siblings bullying and stuff like that, it also encouraged me to stand up for myself as opposed to like lay down and take it. And one of the ways that I know for a fact that I was doing that was either like journaling about them, which was always coming out as bars. It was never coming out like, I hate my brothers, they make me mad. It was always bars like, yo, this person is a and this month make me sick. And like I was going off and very inappropriately at a certain point too. But you know what? Like this was the release for me at that point. When I was in elementary school, I was in the drama club, I was in the choir. We had AZ lyrics. This is before Genius Lyrics, before YouTube could put the lyric pages. So any song that came out that I was really in love with, when I wanted to learn the words, I had to download the lyrics. I had to read that over and over again. You couldn't count on the radio to play that song when you wanted to hear it. And when you wanted to hear it, you put the little tape over the little empty box on the cassette tape, put that in your little recorder, then you could record your songs, make your own mixtapes, right? So by the time I was in middle school, we were doing the mix CDs, the burning CDs and stuff. And I think, at the same time that I was really engaging with hip hop as well as, oh, I'm such an R&B head, it's really wild. At the same time that I was listening to these songs and sort of gravitating towards them because of the ways that they were really pulling at certain emotions that I was feeling and really couldn't articulate at the time, I then began to revisit that writer's spirit of my own to say, oh, let me jot some of my feelings about this down. Let me jot some of my feelings about that down. And, I still own, honestly, I could, looking at my bookshelf right now, I still own some journals that I hope nobody ever infiltrates my home and finds these journals from my childhood that have, some of my very early writings in it. And I think fondly about the way that poetry came to me when I needed it most. And it offered me the clearest and
Mm.
most effective and actionable, I will say, understanding that none of this makes sense. Like none of this life, none of this world, none of any of it. But, you know, even that can be used, and we can use our lived experiences to process, to empathize, which could bring us closer to making sense of some of these things for ourselves. And I think about it continuing to be my vessel so much so that now it is my lifestyle, it brings in my means of living, right? I think so often about how poetry specifically, I feel, is a very communal art. It isn't something that is meant to be private or to be kept to oneself, right? And so I think so much about how even some of our experiences and how we're able to process them. For me, it was happening through those R&B songs. Like nobody had broken my heart at that time except maybe my daddy. So if I'm singing
Mm.
about somebody leaving me, it's you, brother. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be some man or some woman or so, it doesn't have to be some real figure. I'm finding myself in these lyrics from the way that they are reaching me. And I say that, and in closing, just considering like my lived experience in today's day as an educator, I could be in a room full of 28 students looking at the same exact piece of literature and get 27 different perspectives. And only 27 because one person fell asleep, and that's totally okay. Because come as you are, okay? Come as you are.
Yes.
But I think so much about how poetry can do that and how people can do that, how people could be multifaceted in such a way that they could be incredible to one person and really be a dirt bag to someone else, right? And the same as poems, it's about where you're at and in life when you find it. And I think that's one of the main things that keeps me gravitating towards this particular art form.
Nice. And I definitely want to say, like, well, one, if you still have your mixtapes, I forgot who did this years ago. And if you can find a Teddy Ruxpin, I would love to know what the Teddy Ruxpin does when you put it.
Fire, fire. I'm gonna look it up. They gotta have it on like Etsy or eBay. They gotta have something, a working one. Brilliant, brilliant. Yes,
Because I'll never
because I
forget
could
the
probably make a
meme.
whole mixtape. We could get a Grammy, Nicole. We gonna have to
Yes.
write this down. We got to write this down. We got to write this down. Cause we could do a whole mixtape.
Because I wish I knew who created the meme years ago, where it was like Teddy Ruxpin, and it was like put in a new edition tape. Which I'm a huge R&B soul head too, neo soul, and
Yes.
I'm like, oh, I want to try that. So I hope you do that with your mixtape.
Yes, yo. Every once and again, I feel like he just did it recently. Every once and again, my brother will send me a like a screenshot of the Little Fisher Price like radio and be like, "Yo, your first hit." Like, and he always tell me, "I want to be credited. I want to be credited as the muse for your first hit." And honestly, I can't deny it. I really can't deny it. Because it wasn't even just the fact that I had done it. It was, and this goes back to what I was saying about this being a communal art form. It wasn't just the fact that I had created it. It was also the fact that I brought this to my brother and played it
Mm.
for him because I needed him to know this was a diss track made specifically for him in response to his constant and unyielding bullying.
Yes.
And I love that. I really love that memory.
Nice. So before I go on to the next question, like one of the things that white supremacy has done to poetry is make it very elitist and have all these stupid rules and all this stuff. And a really good friend of mine who I teach with, she's also a poet. She's like, poetry is the people's language. It is the language that represents the community and the life as it is. And I
Yes.
love that your poetry does that so well. And so this leads me into my next question. What is the origin story of Savings Time? And can you talk about the story behind the title? Because I think one, it's very unique, and two, is just, I bet, I'm just like speculating that this poetry collection, the contract got signed well before everything that happened last year. And
Yes.
so for it to come out day 15 of He Who Will Never Be Named's administration, I'm like, whoa. So it's like you kind of did an Octavia Butler in like forecast. So I would love for you to share the origin
Yes.
story of Savings Time and then about the title.
Yes, I love that question and I love that you said that because I feel that way more often than not. It's difficult.
Mm.
It's really difficult for me to pinpoint the origins because the history of marginalized people and marginalized communities is so often overlooked that I would
Mm.
say the origin of Savings Time predates my own existence. We had Bessie Smith, we had Ma Rainey, we have Audre Lorde, we have Octavia Butler, who's been mentioned multiple times. We have Lady Phil, and and I know for a fact that I am in no way the first Black lesbian to be sick and tired of all of
Mm,
this, and bearing the weight of hyper awareness and erasure, this erasure of Blackness, this erasure of queer identities, an attempt at the erasure of anyone who makes the choice, who makes the
mm,
voyage to chart their own path. I spent a lot of time intentionally trying to elevate the erasure of the Black woman and the Black butch experience in broad
yeah,
daylight, right? In my first project, that and I think I have been, all of
mm,
us collectively have been, I feel confident in saying, and are being sold a dream, literally and
yes,
figuratively. We are being told what to buy into, who to vote for, what products would take our lived experiences to the next level, but
yeah,
they'll never tell us that we already are the products. Like, we are the products of everything that we have survived. We are everything that we need. And I hope that, the poems that are in this book help to start conversations and broaden perspectives that bring, someone closer to saving themselves time on something that they were preoccupied with or super worried about or super anxious over, as well as, potentially even saving people money, encouraging people to either invest in themselves and or to invest within their communities, right? To stop
mm,
pumping all of our hard-earned money back into these billion-dollar corporations that will literally not even spit on us if we were on fire. To think about, it's time to save, it's time for us to, save our monies, have our rainy day funds. It's time for us to save our breath and not being online and everywhere else arguing with people whose sole intention is to misunderstand us or to nullify us, right? To be saving our energy, right? To
yeah,
spend so much more time experiencing joy, right? And writhing in it, spinning around in it, and not spend so much time, trying to figure out who's stalking our pages, or who's putting
mm,
their hate comments out, or who's doing XYZ to us, as opposed to putting so much attention into the people who are supporting us and who are sharing our work and who are actually being creators and working on craft, which is a word that I love that you've used so much, because so many people are
mm,
heavily invested and driven by this language around content. And there is always this idea that people are creating, but really,
mm,
you can be a creative, right? You can creatively be expressing these things, but there isn't a new idea that is coming. I could quote Audre Lorde till I'm blue in the face, but one of my favorite quotes are and it's in Daylight. There are no new pains. We have
mm,
felt them
mm,
all already. We're not the first people to be in a housing crisis. We're not
mm,
the first people to have a horrifying person at the helm of this country. That this isn't the first time. And so I think that one of the things that I most want to press with the
mm,
title and with the what's in between those pages is the fact that we could really save ourselves time if we were attentive to history, if we were trying less of working against ourselves in terms of trying to garner fame and notoriety, or being driven by money and capitalism, and
mm,
putting a greater effort into our own home base and our own communities. Some of the stuff that I have written in there, I feel, is explicitly directed to even artists and writers and thinkers who want to
mm,
platform themselves, but don't really have a platform, and or aren't really standing 10 toes on anything. They are really just trying to be a face, be the face of something, and get signed or get awards and get accolades, but not necessarily leave a legacy behind. And, I hope that I could save someone some time to that effect as well and tell them it's not worth it, baby. It's not worth it. Like come up off that. It's not worth it.
Yes. I would love for you. So we talked a little bit about this before coming on air. So you have a very beautiful story about the cover of your book. I would love for you to share that with folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So the cover, I was gonna pop up. The
Yeah.
cover of the book is artwork from the remarkable artist Nina Chanel Abney. I, as someone who is has been described as multidisciplinary, have had experiences in all different art forms, but I am super super enamored with visual arts, in a way that I think was, I feel, modeled for me. My grandmother loved art. She loved New York City. She loved fashion.
Mm.
So these are all things that I am, so enthralled with, often enough. And I think so much about I studied modern art in New York City museums. I have a minor in art history from undergrad, and all of this art that we saw, as beautiful or as strange and as abstract as we could have seen, there was seldom a class and or a museum trip where there were black artists that were elevated, and I know that they were alive at the time and that they were created, and based on some of even the research history, some of the art that is being passed off under certain people actually was originated by black people, right? So, with that, I think so much about how within these art forms, people are always still telling stories. And so when I think about contemporary art and contemporary artists themselves, especially when I'm thinking about folks who have some of the same identities at their intersections as I do, I think immediately of Nina Chanel Abney. And to think about this person who has some identity markers that I feel align with mine, and to
Mm.
also know that they are out creating work
Yes.
that could literally be the album art for any one of my poems, should I choose to create, work in that way, for me is not only affirming, but it is so life altering, because these people for me always seemed untouchable. You don't necessarily get to see the artist whose work is up on the walls in the museums. You don't get to meet these artists. You do not get to collaborate. You do not always get to have their artwork on the cover of your project, unless, of course, you are elevated and the New York Times knows about you and everybody wants to see, and the all
Mm.
who's you've rubbed elbows with the right person. But for me, I think so much about how I could look at this image without any poems being written and still
Mhm.
formulate one, generate one within my mind. And this particular piece of art, um, came out in 2020, and it was something that was so vibrant. These colors that are in this image, it features a black femme person lying on a bed reading a book with a cat. There's this little Malcolm X hat that's there. There is the indigenous print in the back, the Navajo print, as well as the kente, and then the bed sheet is the American. It's like, Nina, Nina, did you read this book before I wrote it? And it feels the same, at, you know what I'm saying? And so I love that so much, and I love the honestly, the energy that was put into getting this piece to be on the cover, because I had only had two thoughts in mind, as I was saying earlier, for cover artists, which were Shabalala Self and Nina Chanel Abney. And so I was absolutely willing to do what it took to make sure that that vision came to fruition.
Yes, I love it. Oh my God. And speaking of the connections between the cover art and the book, several of
Yeah.
the themes that emerge in Savings Time include self care for Black women, queer identity, thank you, and the complexities of Black life in the United States, especially with the injustices of power, white supremacy, racism, and all the associated isms. The poems that I had an opportunity to read, there was a preview on Amazon for like Kindle I had a chance to read,
Mm-hmm.
which includes centering the I and centering the first person experience. Can you talk about the role of the narrator in this poetry collection? Who are they speaking for? And then who are they speaking to?
Yes, I love that. I love that. In the words of Elphaba, it's me. um, I am the I. I matter, and it is very unfortunate that that's an audacious statement, to make, because there are so many forces that are willing to help me, encourage me to believe the opposite, right? But using that I think for me is the moment where a reader can distance themselves from the speaker or be drawn in so closely that they forget that this poem is not about them. They forget that they didn't even write this poem, because this is I. This is a moment where I, sometimes in these poems, don't get to be the hero, where I admit I am not just writing these poems, but I am also admitting that I am the speaker in these poems. I am outing myself. And that, for me, I think, too, is an encouragement for a lot of my readers to be a bit more honest with themselves. And the only way I feel I can do that effectively is to model it. I think the role of the narrator in this particular poetry collection is to call people in. I don't
Mm,
want to call people out. I want folks to thumb through these pages, and I want them to find something that they disagree with vehemently or that they agree with. And I want their thoughts around it. And I want them to create some sort of work, doesn't have to be poetry, that is in conversation with whatever it is that they agree with or disagree with on these pages. I want them to
mm,
have more questions. And I think a lot of what that narrator and that speaker's voice is doing throughout each of the poems, even the ones that don't have an I at the center, to consider that this is someone's personal narrative. This actually isn't fiction. This is someone's attempt at being their fullest and authentic self and
mm,
translating that into text.
mm. Prior to having our guests on Black Writers Read, we ask each of them why they write. Here's what you offered. And I love this. I love this so much. I love to write because it's how I reclaim space in this world that too often tries to erase or silence me. As a Black butch woman from the Bronx, I write to elevate the complex identities that meet at my intersection. Writing brings out the fullness of who I am, the struggles, the joy, the contradictions, the defiance. It is a tool of resistance, healing, and survival. There's power in putting our stories out there and demanding that our experiences, our truths, and our love be seen and heard. Writing is my way of contributing to the ongoing fight for equity, justice, and visibility. We belong. So I mentioned this earlier in our conversation about how I love how your work lives on and off the page. You've done poetry slams, you've coached poetry slams, you've done spoken word, and have published your writing, which, in, like I mentioned earlier, in the ivory tower, where, they say poetry should start first, these spaces, really, the page is the only sacred place. But for me, all three can coexist because our audience are so diverse and the mission of our words are very clear. So I would love to know, why is it important to you for your work to live in all of these multiple spaces? And then, because also too, I've had a chance to like watch some of your slams. You are very particular with how you choose what is in which space. So I would love to know, why is it important for you for your work to live in these multiple spaces? And then how do you choose and curate which work lives in which space?
Yes, thank you. I feel about my work, my writing, the same as I feel about my physical self. My I want all of my work to have layers and to live life in layers. I think that some of these poems start out as, and some honestly never stop being, really private conversations, whether they're with myself and or if they are born of an experience that I'm having in the world. Like, one of the poems is legitimately based on a time that I was having a panic attack in the backseat of an Uber. That is the title of the poem, and that was literally happening, and everything that is in that poem is literally something that I translated directly from my memories of that moment into this thing that I wanted to share with people, with what was overcoming me in that space and how I moved through it and how I wasn't alone. And I think about that to say that the as these are and start out as private conversations, or sometimes never stop being private conversations that I end up just sharing publicly, the details get so intimate that one might question, how could anyone share this? But I
Mm,
know, and have learned, that shame really lives at the root of a lot of those feelings, and around secrecy, around not sharing, around not wanting to put this piece up in this kind of space, but I'll put it up in that kind of space, and I'll separate. And I don't want to have that level of segregation amongst the topics that I write. There is an energy exchange when I'm sharing with an audience on a stage. There is an energy exchange when someone is thumbing through the pages of my poems. Now, I may not get their energy directly if they're reading, but
mm,
if they quote me, if they share an excerpt, if they lend their copy out, that energy is magnified, right? And as for how I choose which piece goes where, I don't think that I do. I think that I let the energy do the choosing. In a space where it is a competition, which I don't operate in that space anymore for a number of reasons. But in the space where it's a competition, I'm thinking mostly about how to get the audience, even if they don't agree with what I'm saying, to agree that I've said what I need to say best, better than anyone in this room, which means that I am being extremely considerate and intentional of the demographic of this room and what work they're responding to. And even if I don't have any work in it that's remotely, to me, connected to what it seems that they're mostly responding to, mostly going up for, I'm going to think about how I can present myself and the stories that I do have to tell in a way that is going to pull their interests and allegiances well away from what they've been going up for this entire time,
mm,
and say, now it's me. And then often, in a lot of instances, man, I was the only one of me. There were many black women, but there were no masculine of center black women telling these kinds of stories of these kinds of experiences with the nuance, and intention that I was sharing with. And so that set me apart. There were times where I was the only woman, and I wasn't the only black person, but I'm the only woman. So it's me telling my narrative versus a bunch of black male poets who are like, we love black women and being a black man is hard. And I'm like, imagine being a dyke. You know what I'm saying? And
mm,
the audience is like, oh. And exactly. Because what are you going to say to that, Pop? Like, what are you actually going to say to that? And me really recognizing how to use stories in that way, but then also learning after a short period of time how I didn't actually want to use. I don't want to use. People always say, I don't want to use. I actually want to exist with, and I want to learn how to grow with and how to evolve with these experiences. I want to be the vessel. I want to be the thing that is used. I don't want to use, my trauma or my pain or any of those things. And I say all of that really to say it really is a matter of energy. It is a matter
Mhm.
of how far I want this piece to go. I could share a piece on a stage at a slam that then goes on the internet and it goes viral and it goes all these places, right? But I could share a piece in a book and then it could be taught in colleges, universities, high schools, elementary schools, middle schools, all over the world. And so there is a different energy in a classroom. Someone finds me in a classroom versus someone finding me on a YouTube. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? And that all of that matters too. And I don't want to be beholden to one specific platform in order to really disseminate what I believe is a truth that needs to be shared.
Yes. And speaking of all of these platforms, one of the things that I admire about you, besides being such a brilliant writer, throughout your career, you've done so much to provide platforms for other artists, like starting the Bronx Poet Laureate. You've been a slam coach, you've been a workshop facilitator, you've been a mentor, you've been an educator, you've been so many things that opens doors for others and breaks through the concrete ceiling to make opportunities for others. So I would love to know, who are some emerging poets that you recommend for us to look out for and support?
Yes, I love this question too. And off the top of my head, KB Brookins, uh, mentee, incredible poet, writer, trans activist out of Texas. Ebony Stewart. I don't even know if some of these names I'm gonna say that are coming to my mind are up and coming, but these are all remarkable artists that if you haven't, folks haven't heard of, they should invest. Ebony Stewart is also out of Texas, Houston to be exact. Big Bronx, Stephanie Pacheco. Uh, Jessica Blandon, who's going by Somebody's Mama, Kay Bell, our current Bronx Poet Laureate, Black woman out of the Bronx, Hato Enriquez, our inaugural Bronx Poet Laureate, Dominican, out of the Bronx, Fanta Balo, Lyrical Faith, who I mentioned earlier, who
Yep.
has ties, yup, at Amherst, who's legitimately getting a PhD in
Yeah.
spoken word and its impact on the youth in our communities, like just so folks
Yeah.
recognize the use when we talk
The
about use,
use.
the uses
The
of
uses.
this particular art form to bring folks together as well as to help build self-esteem, to promote literacy rates, to help folks even figure out that maybe what they didn't imagine on their path was speech writing or holding government office or becoming educators or a lifetime career of being a writer, which all can be found in the space of spoken word and the slam at a very young age. So many are Carl, Michael Iglesias, man, so many different artists that are like popping into my mind that I'm just like, these people legitimately keep me writing. They keep me wanting to write. They keep me coming back to the page, to the stage again and again and again. And there's so many more names.
Nice. I have two more questions for you before we wrap up our time. So,
Yeah.
another thing that I love about you is that you are so the Bronx. Like, it is such a salient and important part of your identity. I love it. So I would love for you to share a little bit about what is the writing community like in the Bronx. I know a little bit about like the music community, but I would love to know. And you shared about Lyrical Faith, who I know. Um,
Yes.
can you share a little bit more about the writing community in the Bronx and how do they continue to fuel your work?
Yeah, absolutely. You know what's funny? Being Roya Marsh has introduced me to so many different pockets that I hadn't known existed before I, came out of my bubble of regular life and decided that I was going to be a poet, that I was going to be a public profile. The Bronx writing community, I feel, is deeply rooted in a mix of cultures and it thrives on the resilience and solidarity. I hear people all the time, if I say I'm from the Bronx, if they read I'm from the Bronx, and was, yo, you know the birthplace of hip hop, and I'm like, absolutely, so true. That was 1973. It is 2025 right now. And so, and so because of that, I want to let you know that I'm a poet from the Bronx. And so, yes, all kudos and all love to hip hop, which truly did raise me in a way. But I think so much about the Bronx right now being a place where different voices, especially those pushed furthest out on the margins, are celebrated and amplified. From 2020 to January. Excuse me, it's not even January no more. From 2020 to February 3rd, I'll say even from February of 2020 specifically, when we first started getting little murmurs of this global pandemic coming, until now, there have been so many different open mics and writers groups. We have the BX writers. They had an open mic out at the Boogie Down Grind. They're always doing events at the Bronx Native. They had an event up at El Barrio and Throg's Neck in the Bronx. These showcases pop up everywhere, and there is so much intergenerational intermingling that I love. There's a powerful energy of mutual support with writers encouraging each other to grow, to take risks. That collective spirit is definitely a part of what keeps me inspired and reminds me of the importance of storytelling as both an art and a tool for social impact and social change. And it really reminds me that regardless of what the statistics say, there are people here who are reading, who are writing, who are looking to build new worlds, to dream up new worlds through literature and literacy. And it helps to keep that candle of hope lit for me to not give up.
Yeah. And I also want to say, and thank you for making that comment, Roya, because, and I really, I'm putting this out there again. I really want to do a tour to these very special writing communities and do interviews. People don't realize, I feel like the more marginalized and disenfranchised people are, the stronger the writing communities are. Like there's a strong writing community in Baltimore. There's this very, I've had a lot of people
Yes.
on from Washington, D.C. There's a very, and it's ironic because I grew up in Detroit, but I grew up as a musician. I'm now learning about the very strong writing community in Detroit. There's a very strong writing community in LA. And even there's a very strong writing community in Brooklyn.
Yes.
Anytime you have, because actually that's how I started. I've always been an artist, but I started writing in my late 20s when I moved here to New England, to very, very white New England. The
Yes.
pen is so liberating. So I realized as you were talking, I was like, yes, she's right. Like the more marginalized and disenfranchised communities are, the more they take the pen and the paper to write. And it's like that richness of storytelling. So yeah.
And that's one of the main reasons, the first words of my book, Savings Time, there's a little author's note in the front, is that they never wanted us to read. That's a
Yep.
huge portion of why they spread that news, to say that propaganda, to say we have low literacy rates. And it's our own governor, the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, said that, she apologized afterwards, but said that kids in the Bronx don't even know what computers are. Just really stupid and ignorant things coming from all different areas of life. And they put that out there, whether they want to retract it afterwards or not, to have us internalize it, to have us believe those things about ourselves, so that other people can start believing that and not read what we're drafting up,
Yeah.
because they wouldn't have quotes like, the pen is mightier than the sword, if the pen was not mightier than the sword. Do you understand what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It wouldn't exist. It's not satire. It's not just a pun. It's not just a beautiful line of poetry. There are so many, and this is a part of savings time. There are so many truths that we pass off as colloquialisms because
Yeah.
that is how they've been passed on to us. Just trivial statements that we can just say at any time. And then you sit down and you think about it and then you like, oh, the master's tools will never dismantle. The
Audre
master's
Lorde.
house. Yep. You like, I am giving all of my money to these institutions to earn these pieces of paper and these letters to say I'm qualified to do XYZ, but then there's a ceiling and I can't ever get hired beyond this point, and I can't because this is literally the master's tool that I'm walking around with. And how am I saying and pontificating around dismantling? Don't get me on my soapbox. How am I going to dismantle this master's house if all I'm walking around with is these master's degrees? But
Yeah.
I just it's really something that I had to evolve. I even I do therapy weekly just to keep myself
Yeah.
in this realm. You know what I'm saying? To keep myself on this
Yeah.
plane, to remain grounded, to remind myself why I'm doing this work, and also that I'm not alone in doing this work. And when it gets too much, there is room for me to put it all down because it is
Yeah.
not my job. It is not my responsibility. The onus is not on me to fix any of this, right? But at the same time, I just keep thinking to myself how affirming it is when I do encounter dissenting opinions, when I do encounter any sort of, negative energy, and I'm just like, okay, we're doing something right. Great. They want me to shut up. I must be on the right track.
Yes, and every day, because one of my core values is read. I've been a reader. Apparently, my parents told me I started reading at 2,
Okay.
and voting. And my parents have since become ancestors, but I am so grateful to them every day, especially recently discovering um, my first enslaved ancestor via a lot of research.
Wow.
I am very adamant about teaching in communities of color. Reading is so important, and voting. These are two pieces of power that were taken from us purposefully, and especially recently. And it continues with the banned books and all this shit,
Yep.
purposefully taken from us. And I hate to hear stupid stuff like, oh, these communities aren't reading. But I'm like, really, 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 you will be surprised. Like, like I said off camera, and next I have one last question for you because it's 7:08. Um, there are 4 particular like Black writers podcasts that I think of, and we overlap guests, but at the same time, we need these spaces for one another because there are people like, I can't believe the governor of New York, but at the same time, I can
Right.
hashtag white supremacy, who say stupid things like we don't read and we don't have computers. And I'm just like, do y'all realize how avid readers Black folks are? Like, there's tons of book clubs everywhere, and like book clubs I'm trying to break into, like
Yeah.
in
No, it's facts.
libraries.
It's
Yes. So
facts.
I'm
It's
just,
facts. That's absolutely factual.
yes. And so I would love to end our time together, Roya, and I appreciate you being on so much. What is next for you, and how can the Black Writers Read community support you on this journey?
Yes. So savings time is out tomorrow. Everywhere that books are sold, don't buy it from none of them shady places. Um, Request it at your local library. You can get it from local bookshops. I would love for people to have free and public access to it. Start book clubs around it. Suggest it to your book club communities. Whoever's out there listening, Black writers read can support me and follow. I have so much travel coming up, more writing, more working. The story never ends. I am in the throes. When I say throes, I mean this project is throwing fists and elbows at me in the throes of creating YA novel in verse. So, remain on the lookout for that. I'm really trying to break into these classrooms with queer, masculine of center. character. It's not predicated on trauma. It's predicated on, in the words of my dear friend and mentor, Ebony Janice Moore, dreaming ourselves free. It is predicated on our freedom to dream, how liberating it is to see a world other than the one that we feel is laid out for us for ourselves. And you know how it's never too soon for us to start that. It's really never too soon for us to start that. I'm in my 30s having that experience based on the ways in which my parents were and were not allowed to dream for themselves and dream for us. But I hope that, you know, the generations beyond me can have these awakenings in their 20s, and then they can have these awakenings in their 10s, and then people can be born knowing that they can legitimately, not as a phrase, but they can legitimately grow into whatever magic they dream up for themselves.
Oh, that YA book gonna be fire. Oh my God.
Yo, we
And
pray.
yes, and I admire people so much who do YA because of the very important formative experiences that young people have. They need that representation and that reassurance that they matter. So thank you for authoring this book.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so Roya, thank you. It's 7:12. I held you 12 minutes over. Thank you for staying on. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for writing. Thank you for existing, and thank you for being your full authentic self.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you for this space. Thank you for sharing your platform, the Black Writers Read community, with me. I'm so grateful to have been here and to have shared. And I can't wait to hear back whatever it is that I said, child. I can't
Yes!
wait. I don't know what I said on here, but I can't wait.
You were just spitting brilliance, trust me. You were spitting all kinds
I'm
of
grateful to hear you
brilliance.
say that. I don't even me. I'm gonna be watching the playback like this. Okay,
Yes!
gems, taking notes. Okay. Okay, bars. Okay, I can't wait. This is my favorite part of any interview: reading the article or listening afterwards. Cause wow, I said
Be like, I said
that. Damn, girl, off the cuff. I'm into
I
that.
gave a Peabody Award worthy interview.
Virgil,
Hey,
was this a keynote? Was it was it a keynote?
yes. So I'm gonna go ahead and take you off. I'm gonna wrap up and then check in with you after I end for just a couple of seconds, and
Okay,
then
cool. I'll be right here.
yes, thank you
All right,
so much
thank
for
you.
being on. So thank you all for joining us for episode 15 of season 5 of Black Writers Read. I live 2 houses down from the train track, so that's what you're hearing. I do this in my house. Support Black Writers Read by subscribing to my YouTube channel, where many of you are joining us from today, or the audio podcast, which is available on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon Music, wherever you get your catalog podcasts. Also, feel free to drop a review of Black Writers Read wherever you get your podcast. By supporting us as a subscriber or reviewer, you're growing our community, which can lead to longer term sustainability for the platform. Visit blackwritersread.com to learn about the podcast. I am also on Instagram at Black Writers Read, which I have in the link in bio, a campaign going to for every author that I have on Black Writers Read. I buy copies of their books, and I have Black Writers Read bookshelves at several community colleges where I teach in the region. So thank you all for joining me this evening, and more important, for ensuring that Black authors continue to matter. I will be back soon. Be sure to check me out on Instagram for our upcoming broadcast.